let's give it a go. Evening, y'all. How's it going? Welcome to another Lockdown Live chat. As usual, joined with my awesome co-host, joined all the way from the other side of the planet. No, not really, just Joburg, Mr. Alec Larson. How's it going?
It's good. You can see I'm in space because in space there's no load shedding, unlike Joburg.
Or like here in Cape Town, I'm literally right in the middle of it. So apologies to any of our viewers if I get kind of shut into the dark. It'll just add to the metal motif, if you will. So anyway, in light of all the darkness, we thought we'd shed a little bit of light, if you will. And what better way to kind of do that than by actually tour agent, PR manager extraordinaire. We know him as Oosthuizen of Devographic. How's it going, man? Welcome.
How's it, guys? How you doing? Nice to be chatting to you under these great conditions.
Yeah, it definitely helps to lift the spirit a little bit. It kind of makes us feel a little bit connected, during these, no pun intended, dark times. Thanks, ESCOM, once again. Last plug for them for the day. So, yeah.
Let it be known, you guys have kept this thing going the last year under hook and crook, no matter what. It's kudos. I've been catching a couple of these, and I think if anything, the conditions that we've learned to operate under means that there's little that you can't throw at us and we'll survive.
Yeah, we're definitely survivors down here at the ass end of Africa. That's for sure. Well, yeah, let's kind of pull this in because we invited you over to talk a little bit about public relations, something that some of the bands maybe upcoming or even like established might not be that aware of. And yeah, I mean, let's kick it off. It's always nice to have the Google definition of PR. The professional maintenance of a favorable public image by a company or other organization for a famous public figure or artist. Now that's all fair and well, but let's get serious, David. In terms of the metal community, what is public relations and really the gist of it in terms of the metal scene here in South Africa?
Okay, well, I'll obviously answer it within the sphere of the metal scene in South Africa. But I typically do work from my perspective with bands across the world. So in short, I think when the definition, as you said, it is pretty spot on, but what it really means in reality is the ability for you to go and take your band, but you as your own person is also a brand. And very much the collective of a band is a brand, and the band is a brand. And I know that sounds like fancy words, but it is understanding that what you've got to do is trying to get that brand out there. And it's not going to do itself. It's certainly not going to do it itself in the way that what it needs to be done. So it's really going and taking the steps to really promote yourself to curators, playlisters, media houses, guys that are really sort of in the influence sphere themselves, sitting on top of communities that have got interests that are shared with your brand genre. So at the end of the day, I can almost say it's common interest community marketing. And by that I mean is finding those people out there that share an interest with the genre, the type of music, the look and feel of what you got, and really exposing those people to your music, to what you have to say, but in a way that you're also doing it consistently good and consistently following it up. So it's about frequency and it's about consistently. And there's some of the guys that do it almost naturally good. Like I said, I'm proud to say that South Africans aren't just, as we just said, survivors and DIY bastions, because we've not historically always had the same opportunities as everybody else, but it certainly made us a community of guys that go and kick in doors when there isn't any often, and going to find those those little opportunities. And it comes down to not just also about looking after your brand, but it's about making connections via networking. So the other very important thing is to be consistently on the receiving end of newsletters and people's posts and people's communities and chats, and then listening for those opportunities and then going to bring the two together, whether it be a promoter doing a show or being at another band that's looking for a collaboration. And that way you expose your brand to those communities, ultimately at the end of the day, so that you can get played. So you want to get your music played and you want people to give a shit at the end of the day, let's be honest. So you don't just make it. It's not a field of dreams where you build it and no one comes. You've got to make sure that people come and listen and then want to know more. So you leave them with a call to action to also want to find out more. And that's the very important thing, is not just leaving it out there and drop it, but sharing with people enough about how they can find out more and how they can engage with you more, and how can they ask questions, how can they buy some merch from you, because at the end of the day, it's also all about revenue. Let's be honest, it's something remains a hobby until you can properly turn it into a career. And there's nothing wrong with having a hobby if you're really good at your hobby and you enjoy doing it, and you've sort of set your objectives for yourselves to be a band that goes out there on the weekend and have a kick-ass time, and you're happy to kind of do that as a hobby. But for a lot of the bands that I work with, they've made the decision that they want to take it as a career, or they're certainly very serious about their hobby to the point where it's probably an interim step for them, where right now they've got day jobs, but they're very, very mindful that at some juncture in the very near future, or there's a roadmap that they want to do this as a professional offering. And so they're going the motions of earning the respect and getting out there. I know it's a very long-winded way of answering it from various angles, because it is such a very complicated thing to kind of draw out. And we haven't even gotten to AR, we just talked about PR. So we're not even talking about artist repertoire, which is extremely important. And PR and AR are like, they go hand in hand, yin and yang, left and right. You can't almost have one without the other. So it's a very important half of the whole.
So true.
Cool.
Alex, I'm loving your spacey background there, dude. It looks like you're literally like somewhere in a Devin Townsend video or something. It's super rad.
It's the one way to face the darkness.
Oh, that's it. And you're the only dude not having load shedding right now, ironically, and you're in the dark background.
Well, I'm not load shedded. I'm just dealing with electrical fault. But that's that's a story for another day. So you mentioned AR, and obviously you have a repertoire of artists under your belt, and part of that, like onboarding a new client, you obviously have to be selective that it influence, because there could be an influence on your brand as Devographic, right? So what are some of the key things you look for as a PR agency before taking on a new client?
That's a fantastic question, Alec. I really like that question, because it is so true. I mean, you had Devar on here some time ago as well, and I really enjoyed that chat. And he also touched on the fact that you got to be very specific around who you take on, because it also doesn't help you take on somebody that you can't have anything to offer, because it has to be a very good relationship two-way. You got to click firstly and foremost with the artist. You got to certainly also enjoy the music, because you got to put your guts and blood and soul on the line as an AR PR guy. The hours that you put in to promote that brand means that you got to live that brand as much as the band. And in many ways, I often become almost the unseen member of the band. I'm not on stage, but I'm certainly everywhere else but on stage. So you got to gel with those guys. You got to have a specific ethos that you also share. Like, for instance, this, and also ironically, I do mention I don't just work with metal bands. Ironically, if you look at my repertoire, I look after several artists that is completely not even metal, So I also look after bands like, for instance, Zebra, which is in the Afrocentric indie alternative space. I've even worked with bands like Shades of Africa, which is like a completely like modern traditional music, you know, that's got great artists like Norza. But then again, on the other side of the spectrum, I've also worked with bands like Marine, which is almost becoming like a mix between traditional synthwave and, God, the thing we just did with Akil from Tesseract means it's almost like synthwave gent in a way, or synthwave rock, you know. So the genre doesn't actually mean the gel, you know. It means what can I do to bring value to that band. So from that perspective, you know, it's always important that I don't just kind of meet the guys and find out what are their objectives, because that's what everything at the end of the day is about. What are the objectives? What are those milestones to getting to those objectives? Because they could be different things for different bands. That's why I always say, you know, when bands approach me, they're like, okay, what's your rate card and what's your kind of, can you just quickly send me your rate card and your services card? And I can do that, but you know, that's not necessarily the menu of services that's going to take your particular brand based on what you want to achieve from point A to B. Your point B might just be to get a community of Facebook followers that is starting from ground zero, and you'd be happy with your first 1,000 followers or whatever, versus another band that's been around 10 years. Their objective would be to kind of onboard and launch an album and get 30,000 streams, you know. So those are two very different objectives, and to that end, there's very different conversations we have. But yes, I typically, you know, I do my homework and I go and listen to the band's music, and I have chats with them. You know, Alec, we've been fortunate enough to do some work together. You know, you've got to have a common interest and some passion, and you've got to share some of these things that make you excited to put it. Because otherwise, I must be honest with you, if it's not a band that I don't foremost enjoy, there's no point in onboarding when I'm trying to flog something that I don't foremost have an absolute passion and believe in. So that's number one. And then secondly, yes, there's got to be something, of course, you know. It also, you know, it doesn't help that you are the only guy that believes in it, and the rest of the world has absolutely no appetite for it. You know, there's got to be something to flog as well. At the end of the day, you know, everything is in a magic formula of the C's. I always call it the you know, it's content, community, commerce. Those are the three things that make everything work. If you've got content, great content, you know, we can go out there and get a community. The content with a community will ultimately need commerce, so that you then have a business. And when you have the right relations of content, community, and commerce, then you can start working on clout, which is impact, you know, and consistently doing that, which is the other C, consistency. So all these great C's sound like a marketing spiel, but it's really, truly important then when you tick the C's and you get them in the right balance, because community is everything today. That's what social media is about. It's community. God knows we've lost all the other beautiful, wonderful, you know, we've lost physical product. You know, the fact that you no longer have CDs, it's all streaming. You know, revenue has dwindled down to almost nothing, which is the commerce side of things. So people have had to go out and find new ways of revenue, which was always the ability to go and sell merch, right? And to do touring. But now, you know, COVID has also given that a bit of a shot in the arm. So people have really had to think out the box in the last year. So the commerce side of things have evolved very rapidly now, like these fact that everybody is like doing live streams like you're doing. I mean, what we're doing right now is a great example of, you know, coming to the party and adapting to a changing environment so that we can actually survive. But again, I think a bit of a long-winded answer of saying that, you know, there's got to be good content so that we can go grab community. And when you have those two, commerce will follow.
Oh yeah. And always believe in the talent, I guess, like you say. Well, I guess that kind of segues quite well into the next question I had, because we're obviously in a very social media orientated world at the moment, especially during lockdown. Public relations is kind of a two-way street. I mean, you can go knock down as many doors as you can and make as many connections as possible. But at the end of the day, the bands need to treat themselves as a brand. And by doing that, all the content that you would get, all the reviews that you would get, favorable or not, it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of the local talent when it comes to the exposure, because you'll go push a release out, you'll get a number of single and reviews and all of these great posts and listings, but I guess kind of the question I have is, how important is it in 2021 for a band to be able to bounce back all of the information and everything that you give them to keep pushing their brand further, and not kind of use a 3-month PR campaign and just disappear after the release, which tends to be a bit of a trend that we see. They don't keep it going hot the whole time, you know. It's like hot, and then it tapers down over the months ahead. So what are your thoughts on being consistent on social media, at least? Like quite a few bands that we actually know.
That's exactly the word, another C, consistency. You know, you have to not just be good, you've got to be consistently good. And, you know, everything in life is about frequency and consistency. And so when you look at it, even algorithmically, if you think about it, look at a community that you've built on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Spotify. All of these softwares, and Alec, you'll resonate with this as being a software developer. Everything algorithmically is about data input. And the moment you can crunch data, the more you can denounce insight. So that is what an algorithm like. It needs input for it to come to a well-rounded conclusion. The less data you give it, the less frequent the results and the less accurate the results. So that's exactly the same. That is also why, for instance, Facebook, if you have a community of people that a year ago you last spoke to, and a year later you speak to for the first time, and you wonder why now there's hardly any likes, there's no clicks, there's no shares, there's no mentions. It's because not only out of sight, out of mind, but even the algorithm themselves look at when last you've posted. They look at the content score in terms of the quality of what you're posting. And by that, I mean everything like, for instance, video counts way higher than photos, and it counts more than these long reams of text. And so even algorithmically, the platforms count against you as you start tapering down in terms of your frequency of posts. And of course, it also looks at what you're saying. You know, it doesn't help that you also post the same thing consistently over and over, because that becomes repetition, and repetition is nothing more than spam. And you'll see as people start finding your content boring or repetitive, they'll start unliking and unfollowing you. Those that do tend to get and see it. Of course, this is why Mark, let me not say a swear word, but like that Mark, you know, the social media platforms of the day, you know, a lot of people have criticized them for saying that you're not letting me see my community. But at the same token, that is true, because it is a bit of a money hungry approach on one hand. But on the other hand, what they are doing is they're saying, we want to incentivize those that are really actively involved in the brand and are actually reading your posts and are actually liking and are actually commenting. Those are the guys that should see your posts. So that is why, for instance, you can have a band page of 100,000 follows, but you get no likes and no engagements, because the people at some point might have seen you, click like, and they never came back to look at it. So obviously they're not going to see it, because the algorithm does, to them, you're not a quality result for them to display the content to. Of course, now what they do is they tell you to go and put money into it so that it shows to everybody, and many times that's just throwing money after bad. Providing if you do good content, though, you know, there's certain content that I highly recommend boosting, of course. And there's some of the things that I recommend that you put money behind almost exclusively, but it depends, you know. So, and to come back to your original question, you know, is it important to be frequent? Yes. You know, it doesn't help that you have a 3-month campaign, you knock it out the ballpark, the algorithms and the fans and everybody loves you, and then nothing for 3 years or a year even. You know, this also is why a lot of the bands have shifted to the idea of single releases. Let's rather release a single every 2 months or an EP every 3 months than an album every 2 years, and the fans forget about us. And at that point, you know, now a new album comes out 2 years later. You know, even promoters, you know, I mean, you mentioned, you know, I'm involved with several companies that do promotion work. We go and look at the kind of artists that are not only out there, but are consistently doing things, meaning that they keep their audience not only top of mind, but that reverse, you know, that the fans also keep them top of mind, because that is the kind of guys that also physically draw audience. It's not just this disjointed huge community on Facebook, but now they got the show and there's like 2 people pitching up at the show. or vice versa. You know, they got a massive amount of people pitching up at the show, but they got 20 people following on Facebook. You need a good balance. And that comes down with content. So another question, well, another really valid point you mentioned, Lyle, is artists need to see themselves as brands, because ultimately you may be the drummer in the back and you value yourself only as the drummer, and you can't.
Oh, Dave, I think we lost you.
Every single one of those guys in the boy band not only have their own 200,000 followers and 300,000 followers, but they've got, you know, they've got the guys almost like, who's your favorite Bad Street Boy, or who's your favorite NSYNCer, you know, and they can name each guy by hand. And each one of the band have almost their own careers, you know, they equally as important as the whole. So 1 + 1 = 3 in those cases, because they understand their brands. Now, why bands don't understand that always is often where I coach them and say, guys, you got to be out there. You got to promote yourself as much as I'm going to promote you, but you also got to do it responsibly. So, because often these oaks do the opposite. They go shoot their mouth on Facebook and start fights with everybody. And that equally reflects very bad on the collective, on the band. And that's why often social media has become tolerant in today's society about bullshit like that. And that's one of the things as well, Alec, to get back to your question, you know, one of the things that I also look when I onboard a band is, what is the tendency of these guys to see themselves and take themselves seriously enough that they want to take this to the next level, as opposed to just, you know, kind of shooting their mouth off and doing themselves more harm than anything. So it's a bit of a responsibility, because the moment you make that decision to be a brand, act like it, you know, be responsible and learn what it means to have an opinion, but an opinion that is a valid, justifiable opinion, not just a rant on social media like you often see.
This is actually the perfect segue into one of the questions that I jotted down for later in our discussion, but it's sort of, yeah, it's a perfect segue for now. Without obviously dropping names, have you ever had to drop a band because of a PR sort of nightmare, because of misbehaviors of individuals? Or if not, what's like the sort of worst behavior that you've ever witnessed? Again, obviously without defamation of character or naming and shaming.
Okay, the first thing is, thank God, very happy I've never had to drop a band or an artist or anything to that matter. Remember, I also work with media companies, which is the other side of the coin. You know, you also have media houses themselves that often can just go on a tangent, and you know, you feel like you don't want to send them media releases anymore, because it's almost, you don't want to have your brand on that channel, because that in itself could be damaging, right? So thankfully not, you know, so that hasn't happened. And I really hope it doesn't, because obviously anything could happen in today's society, but thus far nothing, touch wood. And sorry, Alec, what was the other part of that question? Have I ever had that happen? And if not?
If not, what is the worst sort of behavior that you've ever witnessed coming from a band, without like obviously mentioning two?
Oh, okay. Well, luckily it wasn't one of the artists that I was involved with. But one of the things, and again, I won't mention names, but yes, a typical thing that happens is, no, the guys are kind of have a shot at playing a festival. That's for argument's sake. So, you know, they get picked up on a bill and they go and play a show. And then either they don't like the show, or they don't like the slot, or they just get puss drunk, and they all of a sudden at the end of the day, you know, they're on their phones at the show, and it is just like insult after insult. The crowd this, and F the promoter, and this is bullshit, you know, that kind of thing. And then, you know, they don't understand the damage they do to themselves, because that kind of thing not only makes the fans that bother to come and watch the band, yes, there might have been 10 fans, but you know, you're on a festival, you're on a big stage, you're earning your keep, and you are going through the motions of playing an opening slot. So you might be the first band, but you know, I've seen Oaks actually take an opportunity like that, and rather seeing it as an opportunity to network and impress not only the fans that have bothered to show up early to see you, and the promoter, and they kind of spit in the face of what has been offered to them, and then they wonder why they never get picked up again for another show. So that's definitely one of the worst I've seen. You know, it's sort of like seeing the glass as half empty as opposed to half full. And then at the end of the day, you know, these guys break up because now they're not getting shows anymore and the fans don't support them anymore. So that's definitely, I think, one of the worst things is as it comes down to what we said, you know, misusing and abusing the kind of responsibility of just acting behavior on social. You know, I know people, you know, and that's, yes, this is one of those topics that we can go into for hours of conversation, right? It's sort of at what point is freedom of speech and responsibility of saying something in a way that is still responsible? I mean, punk rock bands got that right for hook and crook. They managed to make an impact and say what they needed to say. And they certainly at no point backed down from a very important and pretentious topic. But at the same token, they did it in a way that rather earned respect for the cause, as opposed to looking at people look at them and just go, it's just a bunch of oaks ranting and raving. You know, there's probably no substance there. You know, let's move on.
Yeah, it's so true, so true. Well, I mean, we talked about a little bit of the good. We've spoken about it now, a little bit of the bad. Somebody that's been involved in the metal scene, in the South African metal scene, you're beloved, you're pretty much a household name. You've shot pretty much every band of substance in this country as well. But more so over, I think, I think the one thing that we all share in common is that we actually are fans of SA metal. So I guess kind of trying to put a little bit of a blanket over all of this. What are your thoughts about SA metal now in the global community? Where do we stand? We obviously have a couple of bands like Peasant and Vulvodynia that are really like take it to the next level. We haven't really seen anything really like that since the days of Groinchen and maybe VOD. So, you know, so what are your thoughts? I mean, you've obviously got a huge roster of quality bands across multitude of metal genres and other genres. So, yeah, what's the Devo perspective on metal in South Africa 2021?
You know, the first thing is you're absolutely right. We got so many good artists, and I'm foremost a fan. I have to be. You know, I'm foremost a fan. I have been in metal since I played in a band in '95. So you talk about Groinchens, you know, I love those guys to bits, and you know the VODs. That's when I was in a band back then, and I've just stayed a fan. You know, you've got to be a fan foremost. But secondly, you know, we have something to say. The difference is, I think a lot of people shoot themselves short. What I hear back from a lot of these media channels is people often think, oh, I'm from South Africa, I'm doomed to fail, nobody cares about us, blah, blah, blah. I hear the opposite. I hear interest. You know, when I often send it to media channels, the fact that you coming from South Africa or even Africa, I'm talking of, for instance, our brothers in Botswana, you know, Overthrust, you know, when me and Vulture have a chat, you know, you got to see that to your advantage. You know, a lot of guys are starting to see it. You got to imagine. I mean, I had this conversation recently at one of the curators at one of the big magazines. The guys are saying, you got to understand, I receive, and I kid you not, upwards of 60 to 100 press releases one day. One day, you can imagine. So these oaks receive between 700 maybe to 1,000 a week. You know, those are emails that are either just press releases for singles or videos or EPs or promos or interviews or features. I mean, and this is obviously now the more organic submitted stuff. This is not even the line that's going out the door of people that have got paid premieres that you know, if you want to book something in that magazine, it's 6 months to get something in that magazine in terms of a paid feature. So what sets you aside from those 100 per day? And it's not just that you got to write it in a good way, but often when you got something like you are from South Africa, it's an asset. And people don't often understand it, you know. And we've got some of the guys like the Vulvodynias, you know, lighting the torch for us. And that is actually becoming to a point where the moment you say you're from South Africa, I had it, for instance, with one of my bands recently, China, of all places. You know, we've been chatting to this channel in China, and these guys haven't even got Facebook. They're not allowed Twitter. They've got a very proprietary social media channel, which is China's version of Facebook. So when they actually did the interview with the band and they posted the stuff, they sent all me these links, and I had to go and sort of download those apps and just get on there because it's not on, you know, they're not allowed to post it on Facebook and Twitter and these things that don't have it. But when you go on there, and I finally translated it back into English, and I chatted to the guys, they were so complimentary about the South African metal and the quality of our metal. And as you said, it by names, naming the Vulvodynias and the Bleeding Spawns of this world, etc. And often, you know, the guys are saying, because South Africa, firstly, they didn't think that there was music coming out of South Africa that was metal, and secondly, something that's coming out of South Africa of that quality. You know, so what I'm saying to bands is, yeah, I mean, South African metal is definitely not just improving and increasing weekly and monthly and annually, but I think also, you know, there's some of these guys that need to wear that badge bloody proudly. You know, don't see it as a negative or try and put yourself off as a UK band, even though you're South African. No, wear it bloody proudly, because we're certainly getting the respect there, and our boys are doing the hard work. And again, like we said, you know, I think why is because we've gotten to be known as bastions of DIY. We've had to go and do it ourselves. We've had to go and find out how to do it. And we've got respect from the industry for being guys that are go-getters and don't say no and just bring brutal shit to the party.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome. It's been really great to sort of catch up with you and get your look at things. Just to sort of wrap things up, I think it would be very cool at this point in time if there's anything you would like to plug for your PR company. If there's anything you want to say, now's your time.
Well, foremost, thank you, Lyle. Thank you, Alec. I appreciate what for this opportunity. It was great to chat to you. Thanks. I love what you guys are doing at the label and MMD. And Alec, you are one of those guys that are just a testament of bloody hard work and consistency. You know, so for instance, all these projects are involved with, the collaborations you're doing, you know, you're always plugging away at something. So kudos to you, really much respect and love what you do. And it's awesome. Keep doing it. In terms of the rest, you know, I just want to say that again, you know, a lot of people get disheartened by COVID time and when will we tour again? And it's coming. It's obviously coming. But one of the things that I have experienced, which has been amazing this last 18 months, because I always got to, you know, you got to see the positive in everything. And what I've seen out of the last 18 months is Oaks not just sitting on their laurels and accepting defeat or wanting to die. You know, I've seen more content created because there's been more time to create. There's never been a time where people had more opportunity to create. I've never seen more collaborations than ever because Oaks have been reaching out to artists who aren't touring consistently. I mean, we're about to announce one of these magic collaborations in the next few weeks, which I can't wait to announce because it's one of those, again, that's going to blow everybody away when they hear. I mean, it's like Chaos Doctrine with Jürgen from Entombed. You know, it's like, holy shit, how did this happen? Well, you know, these are dudes that are generally touring 3 years and then they're in studio for another year making a new album and repeat indefinitely. These folks almost never have the time for this stuff. So if anything, I wanted to say, guys, keep at it, because more than everything, you know, use this opportunity to create, so that when we can go back to touring, you've got such a volume that you can go and blow people away with live, that it's just, you know, it's just, you're paving the way for the next great series of festivals to come, and it will come, you know, I'm sure. So I just want to say I love every single South African band that keeps going at it and doesn't accept defeat. And that's it. It's just all, you know, so that's it. Keep at it. Rock and roll, metal on.
I love it. I love it. And I guess, yeah, I mean, we couldn't end this chat on a more positive note. Dave, it has been awesome having you on. We will definitely have you on again. A well of wisdom that we need to sap dry. So yeah, we will definitely be with you again. And yeah, Alec, what do you say? We good to wrap up another week? Load shedding lockdown, if you will.
100%. Yeah, it's been a great, very informative session. And I think that's good for the week.
Thank you, gents.
Yeah.
Hopefully
awesome, guys.
Hopefully we can share Brewski in the pit soon.
Definitely.
Awesome.
Can't wait. guys, we'll be back next week, same time, same place on the interweb. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. That helps. And yeah, keep well, keep safe, keep that social distancing. We'll be back to normal soon enough. Also, guys, have a wicked week ahead. Laters.